Hey, Sarah.
We are good to go to start right at 10.
There's two of me, and one of me has even longer hair than I see.
My God.
Somehow Lisa joined, but she has my name.
Sorry, everyone. Could you please go on mute and turn video off? We're live broadcasting now.
Sorry.
Buenos días a todos. Gracias por acompañarnos esta mañana. Si alguien necesita interpretación para esta reunión hoy, por favor, si puede en el chat o alzando la mano, nos puede dejar saber que desea traducción en español y le facilitaremos esa opción. Muchas gracias, Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Snyder. I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of Indio. I want to thank you for joining us this morning for the Highway 111 Corridor Specific Plan Virtual Community Meeting. Before we start today's meeting, we would like to take a moment of silence in honor an observation of the September 11th anniversary date. If we would please take a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you. Miguel, if you would advance the slide, please. Thank you. I'm Sherry Oken-Rudnack with BAE Urban Economics. It's nice to be here today. Thank you for coming. This is the second community meeting for the Highway 111 Corridor Specific Plan. We just went through welcome and introductions. We'll do a quick recap of the goals of the specific plan and what we've heard so far. We'll have our main presentation, Imagine the Possibilities, focused on beautification, housing need, and economic development. And then we're going to have some questions and an interactive discussion at the end. Next slide, please. We have turned off Q&A, and so we would ask you to use the chat function to ask questions during the presentation for us to answer later. And then also as we get to the questions we have for you and for discussion. Again, I'm Sherry Oken-Rudnack with BAE Urban Economics. We are the lead consultant on this project. With us today, we have David Sargent and Peter Vanderwall from Sargent Town Planning, who are providing urban planning and design services for us. And we also have Miguel Luna and Bridget Cauldron from Urban Semillas, who are assisting us with translation and community outreach. Not present today, David Greensfelder is providing retail strategy, Fair and Piers will provide transportation support, and Rincon will support with environmental services. So just quickly to reiterate, here is a map of our specific plan area. You'll see this over and over again throughout the day. You can see that on the east side, the specific plan area follows the 111 corridor to Indio Boulevard, which is on its way to the 10, and all the way down to the west side, where it terminates at the city limits. It is adjacent to the downtown area as well, which is up where you can see that the boundaries actually dip all the way down to 111 over by India Boulevard. Next slide, please. The specific plan is going to focus on bringing housing and commercial development to the corridor, create a stronger sense of place and of arrival in Indio, and establish distinctive, well-connected land use patterns and intensities along the corridor. This is based on visionary planning and design, a thorough market analysis, meaningful community input, and is building off of what has just been completed with the general plan. We're doing this now because Indio has secured funding from the state of California in the form of an SB2 planning grant, which is a planning to provide planning for areas specifically focused on bringing housing to the area, and also as a means to create tools to implement the 2040 general plan. Next slide, please. So our goal as a team is to develop and deliver a specific plan that involves all of the key stakeholders in the city of Indio, including you, the community, residents, business, and property owners, that implements the 2040 general plan vision, revitalizes the corridor as the center of the city, facilitates development of housing, and establishes policies and strategies that emphasize economic feasibility and the ability to attract development to the corridor. Next slide, please. So just quickly, what does the Indio 2040 general plan say about the corridor? As I mentioned, the general plan has been recently completed, and the specific plan is going to create a set of tools to help implement the general plan. And so the general plan, specifically speaking about this area, seeks to restore downtown as the heart of the community and reinvent the 111 corridor as Boulevard 101, making it safer for active transportation like bikes and pedestrians, establish a human scale network of complete streets, open spaces, and building, connect the neighborhoods, enhance community health and wellness, expand commerce, and strengthen and support the tourism and hospitality sectors. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So you can see here what we have is the slash line shows our area of the specific plan. The red line that goes through the middle of it is our corridor, Highway 111. And you can see that the general plan has articulated clearly the land uses that are going to be desirable along the corridor. And so we're really, during the specific plan, focused on how to make that happen and see results. And with that, next slide, please. We have engaged in community support and surveying the community. This is our second community meeting. We had our first one. And the key themes that we've heard so far during this community outreach is that it's going to be important to enhance the appearance and quality of the corridor's public realm, to improve regional identity and promote more activity along the corridor. People really want to have places to go with their family and things to do along the corridor, promote and deliver new types of housing that offer a variety of lifestyle choices, amenities, and price points that consider existing residents as well as people who might move into Indio, and encourage commercial development that create jobs for and provide amenities to existing Indio residents. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Sargent of Sargent Town Planning. Thank you.
Before we do that, para todos aquellos que quizás nos han acompañado un poquito tarde en la reunión hoy, si desean traducción en español, por favor, alcen la mano o póngalo en el chat para poderles dar instrucciones cómo hacer eso. Muchas gracias. David. David, it's you got to unmute. David, you need to unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Oh, great. Yeah, there was no unmute button, and now there is. Thank you so much. So shall I take over?
Yes, you have control now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Miguel. I'm David Sargent from Sargent Town Planning. We're very pleased to have the chance to continue working with the city and community of Indio. We worked on the urban design elements of the general plan and worked with the city to prepare the downtown specific plan. So we're very pleased to have the chance to continue spreading that vision along the entire corridor. So the downtown plan has already been prepared that provides a clear vision. I'm sure a lot of you have participated. We had a lot of public participation in the general plan and the downtown plan process. So restoring the downtown as the civic and social and cultural heart of the city with a strong economic component was priority number one, really, for the general plan. And as Sherry mentioned, that then extending that sort of city center sense of place and identity through the whole corridor is a high level goal. So that within that corridor, corridors are not just one, well, the vision for this corridor is not that it's just a 2-mile long commercial strip, but rather that it's a series of places. So the downtown and the east end of the corridor as it comes to Indio Boulevard are envisioned as the east corridor area, then Midtown around the mall and at the bend that runs from Monroe to Clinton is seen as a very important middle of town at the crossing of Monroe and 111, which is sort of the center of your city. And then the west corridor with a lot of vacant land and some beautiful historic tourist attraction amenities offers huge opportunities. And then the notion is that economic activity, particularly commercial activity, is always best focused at key spots rather than just spread out over the whole length of the corridor. So we're going to help you, and we're going to communicate with you what we've heard so far and how that could happen along the corridor. So if you look at the rest of the 111 corridor as you go through the valley, a lot in most communities, it is just sort of a highway with some grass along it and some trees here and there. And we think that India's version of the 111 corridor can be something much more exciting, much more alive, much more valuable, something that looks like the center of your city rather than a highway that just gets you, into other cities. There's a lot of people who come from all over the world and from all over the region, the world, and the country to India for your festivals and other activities. And we think 111 corridor can be a place that keeps them in India rather than just getting them to the other cities. The original identity of the whole 111 corridor, particularly in India, was date groves. I remember driving through India in the 50s and just stopping for date shakes at the date garden and marveling at the beauty of the groves. And we think that could be an important element of how the corridor, this is a historic photo, of course, of dates being harvested. So we think that's a strong idea for the identity of the corridor. As you come in from the west, you see Shields Date Garden, which has been there for many, many decades. And the dates define your passage into the city and let you know you're in a real place. We have thought about how that character could be extended into some of the large vacant parcels as you proceed eastward into the city. The idea that in order to provide access to new development that may arise along the corridor, you could create new entry points and shallow parking lots or sort of side lanes like a boulevard, less like not a highway anymore, but perhaps a boulevard. And that could create beautiful addresses for new buildings with shops, restaurants, and a lot of housing along the corridor, and access to trails that might run along portions of the corridor, including maybe to the date garden. There are examples of other places that have recently planted date palms. This is Arroyo Parkway in Pasadena, where they planted the median with beautiful date palms about 15 years ago. And they harvest the dates. So we think that one idea for creating, there's a lot of ideas for creating a sense of identity and a unique center. There's beautiful examples of cities that have created gateway arches over the roadway, distinctive signage and landscape linked together to welcome you to the city, and public art. As we were working on the downtown plan, one of the main themes we heard was the local art scene. So there's an opportunity to distinguish your new Central Boulevard with public art and lighting that provides a strong identity all through the day and into the evening. And here's some additional illustrations that we've made of how there could be parking provided right along the edge of the boulevard with bike lanes and wide sidewalks, so that rather than being just a highway that takes you to another city, it could be the main drag of the center of your town, with date palms and other exotic and beautiful plant materials, enlivening new medians or updated medians, have some beautiful crosswalks at a few new signalized intersections that make it start to work more like a central boulevard and less like a highway, making it a safe place for cyclists and pedestrians and a pleasant place to gather with some distinctive gateway buildings at key intersections to let you know you're in an important city, not just passing through an old town. Curbside parking could be provided in some places, and in some places it could be provided by the sort of side lanes that we illustrated in that drawing a moment ago. And bike lanes could be provided if they're buffered from the traffic. And this could all result in the traffic moving a little slower. We've heard that quite a few times, that folks find the traffic to be very fast and pedestrians are a bit nervous. So if you start to develop this type of an environment, maybe first at the downtown, this wouldn't happen overnight, of course, this is a long-term plan, but at the edge of your downtown, or even in the midtown area next to the current mall, you might get this sort of an environment where people would be comfortable along the street with, and this is an illustration of the other alternative, where instead of parking at the curb here, the street cars could pull off into basically little front parking lots that look more like the extension of the street and not so much like just a sea of parking in front of the buildings. And you could, and if you develop this kind of a setback area with the beautiful planting and the active shop fronts here, you could start to have activity in the space right along the side of the boulevard, rather than hiding it behind parking lots. So then we're going to move from that. So this was really the topic that was started out as beautification of 111, but it's really not just about how it looks and how it feels, it's about how it works. Actually, Steve Jobs said that, referring, of course, to computers, not cities, but it's a basic design principle. So we're going to go, so the short version is that the large amounts of vacant land along the highway provide the potential to absorb hundreds and even thousands of new housing units over a long period of time. We're working on a variety of strategies and anti-displacement strategies to make sure that housing for people of all incomes and household sizes and preferences for lifestyle could be accommodated within this vast area at the center of your city. The Transect is an organizing device that we and other colleagues have sort of been working on over the last 20, 30 years. This is a drawing that our friends at Opticos Design in Berkeley made, showing that there's a great variety of housing types. From everybody knows about just houses on large lots in neighborhoods. Everybody knows about apartment buildings. Everybody knows about sort of intense downtown mixed use buildings, but there's a lot of types of housing in between that are smaller multifamily types of housing that could be mixed right in with houses very beautifully. And the housing, and then at the larger scale, wait a minute, is this going? I'm clicking, but no, oh, there we go. The Transect is a conceptual organizing device that allows one to think about complete environments, not just development projects, but at the one end, you've got nature. It's just, there's no buildings in it to speak of, and it's just natural landscape. Then you have rural, which is the next, which can fade smoothly into nature at the edge of your city, where you have a rural landscape with a few buildings in it. Then you have suburban, which is what you're very used to, which is lots with houses on them, with and without sidewalks. Then you have more of an urban neighborhood type, where you can have townhouses and single family houses mixed, and the streets are very walkable, tree-lined streets. And then the urban center zone. So we're really talking about the T4 pieces, which would be neighborhoods with different kinds of housing all mixed together. And then urban centers that would have a lot of shops and restaurants mixed in with housing of different types. So along the corridor, this is an image just of the west end. This is Shield State Garden down here at the bottom, and we're looking up toward Clinton and Monroe. Clearly, it would be important that whatever is built along the back edges of these very deep vacant sites next to houses should be very compatible with houses. It could be houses of some sort that would be a good neighbor to the neighborhoods that are already there. Then there's probably another band within which multifamily housing of different sorts, including types that are that have a lot of characteristics in common with houses, not just big stucco boxes, but housing that looks like it belongs in a neighborhood, could fit in these orange bands. And then right along the highway, it's certainly easy to imagine the sorts of buildings we just showed you a second ago, which would be, 2, 3, 4, even taller stories, buildings with active ground floors where the economy supports commercial activity, which will not be everywhere. There's not that much commercial activity. And one of the strategies here is to then provide to reinforce these street connections that would bring a person from the existing neighborhoods by walking, biking, or driving up to a new center. So if you could imagine, this building might be built at this intersection, all of a sudden the people who live in these homes here would have a chance to walk or bike or drive up to a nice restaurant or stop at a convenient shop on their way home from work and come into the neighborhood. And these actually might be signalized intersections to make it even safer and more comfortable to turn in to the neighborhoods and to turn into shops and restaurants that would show up there. And the commercial uses would be concentrated at nodes at these crossings, not just sprinkled all along. So then as we get into what those colors mean, so in the yellow band along the backs of the existing neighborhoods, you'd have single family houses, might be larger lots than these, might be smallish lots like these. These have alleys behind them so that you're not just looking at everybody's garage doors on the front. That makes a very comfortable neighborhood to walk around in. And speaking of a comfortable neighborhood to walk around in, this plan will address very specifically not just the types of buildings, but the types of streets, the types of parks, the types of courtyards, the types of public open spaces that really make your community, because people get used to thinking of new development as projects, but really your town is the spaces in between all the buildings. And so this plan is going to pay a great deal of attention to that. Now, some of these are not images that would probably be in Indio. Some of these are a greener environment, but many of them are. To be able to come to pleasant places like this on foot or by bike with your family and your friends could make a very big difference in the experience of living in this part of Indio. Then as you fade into that orange area I was showing, you could get into multifamily types, but multifamily housing that feels like a neighborhood, not a project, with courtyards, with little gardens, facing neighborhood streets with visitor parking in front, where your visitor can just pull over and come right in your front door instead of finding a place, in a parking lot and then hiking through the parking lot to get to your dwelling. There's possibilities of townhouses, small houses that would, instead of facing streets, would face little paseos and gardens, have shady courtyards, would be a very high value space in a hot climate such as you have. And in some cases, there could even be the possibility that the ground floor could be initially or after some time made into a little corner cafe or a corner store within the neighborhood, so that you had some amenities even closer to your house. And what connects this all together is neighborhood streets. We've made these illustrations actually for the general plan a few years ago, illustrating the kinds of streets that could be perpendicular to 111 and bring you into new neighborhoods, and through these to the existing neighborhoods that are already adjacent. And the types of commercial use that could happen along probably along 111 could range from fairly conventional shopping center types with parking lots to places that have more courtyards and patios for outdoor dining. Could be you could have corner restaurants like this at one of the places where you turn in from Indio with parking lots behind it. And one of the tricks, and that Sherry's going to talk about, is that until you have quite a lot of residents in an area, you're not going to be too likely to get the retail shops and restaurants to support the neighborhoods. So one of the things that we often build into our plans is a requirement that the ground floors of buildings at some of these important corners be built with pretty large windows and high ground floors, so that if initially they're used as apartments or townhouses, later on, those little fences can be taken away and it becomes shops as the economy grows, rather than building just something that can never be anything but housing at a key corner where you might hope that you could get a cafe or a coffee shop later. We built some buildings like this in the Bay Area about 20 years ago, and they've been working very well ever since. Initially, these were just residences, but now they're little businesses of various kinds. There's another version. We actually developed this when we were working on your downtown plan, where you build an arcade that pedestrians can walk through to shop in the shady environment. But if there's no businesses that want to go in there right away, you can put little planters here and people could use these as homes or offices. And then when the market is ripe for retail or restaurant uses, you can just take those planters away and boom, you've got shops. The most important attribute of these neighborhood centers or key nodes along here is really the outdoor spaces. You know, it's where the spaces between the buildings are where community life happens. And we pay a lot of attention to how those are designed, how those are defined with buildings, how those are shaded and made into comfortable outdoor rooms of your community. Then along the highway, the boulevard, there's various options for buildings that are 2-3 stories or so. This is actually a very lovely one that's over on Palm Canyon in Palm Springs that has commercial at the bottom and housing up on top. Larger scale buildings with shops on the ground floor and shady environments to walk along. And these are examples of the very current, up-to-date. This is what a lot of developers are building right now in a lot of cities, where you have a tall ground floor that is available for commercial use, but doesn't have to be right away. And then you can get 2, 3, 4 more stories of housing on top of that, with parking in garages behind. You can get very high amenity. Oh dear, we okay. I'm sorry, I skipped faster than I meant to. Okay, so what I was showing you there was really what could happen pretty much along the West Corridor and in Midtown and along the downtown edge, but in the East Corridor over here at the end over toward Indio Boulevard, that's become a very industrial environment over the last 50 years or so. It started out as just places with gas stations for people passing through town, and it's sort of evolved into light industrial. So here's just an aerial view where you've got historic 99 that was running along the tracks as it does all the way up through the San Fernando Valley, Highway 111 branching off to the west, the downtown here. So there's opportunities, we think, to create a stunning new gateway where Indio Boulevard intersects Highway 111, and new connections between the downtown and the county justice center with all its new jobs just to the south of it. The fairgrounds is a huge opportunity that we're in discussions with the county about ways to make it a place that the community can use much more of the year in new ways. I'm waiting for, the Justice Center here is a huge new jobs generator, which could provide jobs for people who would, new residents and existing residents of India who might decide they wanted to live nearer to work in new housing. This area has become pretty much industrial. Oh, and by the way, there's a new passenger rail station that's slated to come in here. So the types of change that have been envisioned so far for this area could be adaptive reuse of some of the auto facilities or industrial uses to more active uses that could start to effectively expand the downtown a little bit south and east, and opportunities for housing of different types, maybe housing that's sort of compatible with the slightly grittier semi-industrial character of that West End, and also a gateway of some sort that lets you know that you have arrived in Indio. And possibilities for near-term temp uses that can be put in place in a hurry with, as has been happening all over the country and all over the world during the pandemic, with outdoor dining inhabiting empty spaces in a very short-term way. Sherry.
Thank you, David. So what you see, oh, could you go back one, please, Miguel, or whoever has control now?
Miguel does.
Okay, thank you. So what you see here is a map of the corridor, and we're talking about the specific plan as an implementation plan. The red hatch sites are city-owned parcels, and the yellow sites are vacant. And so as we're thinking about, how to leverage limited resources of the city, we want to make sure we're thinking about some of the city-controlled assets along the corridor, in particular those that are vacant, although we know that there are already plans in the works for the Indio Grand Marketplace. Next slide, please. So we're going to ask questions later, and I think one of the questions we want to be thinking about related to what you've just seen are kind of what are the types of housing that the city should focus on attracting based on the amenities that come with them, and the lifestyle that you're interested in, and then where along the corridor should the city initially focus its efforts, given that, as David said, commercial is going to do better if it's clustered and not kind of spread dispersed along the corridor. Next slide, please. So our last topic today is economic development and making the corridor a thriving place of commerce, entertainment, and employment. Next slide, please. So we are taking an approach to economic development along the corridor where we want to promote development and programs that support existing residents. So we're thinking about what are the infrastructure improvements that can support residents from an economic development perspective. And so that does include things like, mobility improvements and some of those improvements to the public realm that make getting around easier, but also other kinds of infrastructure improvements like access to broadband that creates opportunities for people who don't otherwise have access to those pieces of infrastructure that are important for lifting everyone into higher income jobs. And thinking about targeting industries that build on existing corridor strength. So we know that there's a healthcare cluster there, a government cluster there, an education cluster there. Tying into the arts, as David was talking about earlier, is maybe another target industry that we should think about along the corridor. But we want to make sure that we're targeting industries and uses that complement rather than compete with downtown economic development efforts. Because downtown has its specific plan and the city has identified it as a priority area, we want to make sure, again, that we're not dispersing efforts in such a way that we're not creating critical mass. We want to strengthen and complement rather than sort of cannibalize, and create realistic strategies to strengthening retail markets, which we'll also talk about. Next slide, please. So some of the potential improvements and programs we're thinking about fall into two categories: business-oriented and workforce-oriented. So business-oriented is about supporting businesses and making the area a more desirable place for businesses to go and for their customers to go. So things like street beautification that make people want to be there and walk around are great for retail shops. bringing in visitor amenities, gathering places, giving people reason to be in a place, providing small business support like technical assistance, and then looking at, coordinated marketing and other main street programs and improvements for corridors like this. And again, those active transportation improvements, if you can make people feel safer on bikes and walking, then they will walk by other stores and walk from their homes. Workforce oriented is more thinking about the residents and the people and finding ways to move people into higher wage jobs. So providing broadband, allows kids who don't have access to broadband a little bit more level of a playing field for enhancing their education. Enhancing access is also good for the workforce. So, making the corridor more accessible, faster to get around, either through transportation improvements or active transportation improvements, making it easier to get to work in a timely manner. Creating jobs through industry targeting, particularly around healthcare, and then workforce development programs that support industries along the corridor. So here is where we're thinking about, is there a way to engage the youth? So, thinking about, are there potentials for internships at some of the hospitals? If we target arts as an industry, is there potential for internships? How do we employ programs that do sort of on-the-job training, internships, and kind of reaching out to the local workforce? Next slide, please. So here's just kind of a snapshot of what kinds of jobs are in the corridor relative to what kinds of jobs Indio residents work in. And so you can see up towards the top, arts, entertainment, and recreation, you have a much larger share of Indio residents working in those sectors than you have jobs along the corridor. So it's possible that there's some potential for an arts program. And so that's where we're getting the ideas for how to target these industries, is looking at this data and really thinking through what wants to be on the corridor. Next slide, please. In terms of retail strategies, we recommend building critical mass of specialty retail in downtown first. As I said, specialty small format retail does really well in downtowns. And when you cluster it together, it tends to do better faster and create this critical mass that can support even more downtown, even more retail. And we think that will spread out to the corridor. Creating new housing and public realm improvements can strengthen corridor retail. Again, bringing in rooftops, bringing in new residents will strengthen local retail because you're bringing in more shoppers to the immediate area. And so generally in real estate, retail follows rooftops. That's kind of something we've been ingrained in from for years and years and years. And it's true, a lot of retailers look at, how many homes are around that can support my business when they're making location decisions. And so thinking about how we can enhance the underlying conditions for attracting retail, and new housing comes into that. Lodging enhances local retail, but it cannot support retail alone if tourism is seasonal. So although Indio is, festival city, and there is some great benefits of being a tourist city and attraction, we want to make sure that we're planning for sustainable retail that can flourish under year round. And so focus on strengthening new and existing corridor retail, again, building off of what you have. Next slide, please. Here are a couple of maps. This is the east side of the corridor, and we just wanted to kind of show you some of the kinds of businesses that are already located there. So over on the east side, sort of across from Jefferson Middle School, you can see there's this cluster of orange, these accommodations. And so what you're seeing, I think, is, short-term Airbnb rentals actually. But you see along the corridor, the light green is the auto industry and repair maintenance. And you've got a little bit of retail trade over there. And then even down in the corridor, you've got a little bit of office services over there, just south of the corridor on Indio Boulevard. As you get over towards the mall, as you're getting into kind of the central area of the corridor, you're seeing a lot more food and beverage places and stores than you were. Next slide, please. On the west side, you can sort of see that, business is a bit more spread out until you start getting back again on this eastern side, right around Indio High School, where all the healthcare is. And so that's what you're seeing, that dark green is, healthcare, social assistance. So we're seeing this is where this cluster of healthcare is. And then you've got, again, food and beverage places and some accommodations kind of scattered a little bit down through the west side of the corridor. Next slide, please. So for here, I think, we're sort of start thinking about which improvements we want the city to focus on. Next slide, please. So we are about to go through some discussion questions, and we would really like for you to put your answers in the chat as we go through them. And then as time permits at the end, we want to give everybody a chance to sort of, speak and have a more interactive discussion.
And
Next
just Sherry,
slide.
some feedback for you. We did get a comment in the chat about flexible frontage being a great idea. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Great. Go ahead, please. So the first question is, what types of housing should the city prioritize along the corridor? What you see here is a graph of household income distribution for renter households in that kind of purplish color, owner households in green in the middle, and all households in light blue. And it's showing the percentage of households in each of these sort of affordability levels that are in the city of Indio. And so what you can see is you actually have a good amount of owner households and households overall, about 35%, that make more than 120% of the area median income and are likely able to afford housing as it is. But what you're seeing is, at the bottom where you've got households earning less than or equal to 30% of median income, particularly renters are struggling. They're struggling in those low income areas of 30 to 50 and 50 to 80 as well. And although they're not struggling as much, you can see that there's about 10% of households making between 80 and 100% of AMI, and another 10% making between 100 and 120% of area median income are both are struggling with housing. And so when we think about the kind of housing that the city should prioritize, and going back to thinking about those missing middle housing, those pictures that Dave was showing earlier and talking about, what is the kind of housing that the city should be prioritizing? Would you like to see mixed use market rate housing with ground floor retail to strengthen retail, which we saw some pictures of? That's a little more higher density, would be closer to the corridor. Would you like to see mixed income housing that has both affordable and market rate in the same project or proximate to each other? Would you like to see affordable housing, taking care of those people in less than 80% area median income? Or if there's another kind of housing you'd like to see, please specify, and we'd ask you to put your answer in the chat box, please. And we'll give you just a few minutes. Or if you have any questions about the question, that you can put that in the chat box too. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Given the potential for hundreds, if not thousands, of units to locate along the corridor, which sections of the corridor, so physically, what areas along the corridor should be prioritized for housing development? Do you think you should start, closer to the west side? Do you want to start, closer to the east side, in the middle? Is there somewhere that you feel kind of strongly about that you think is a good place to start bringing in housing to the corridor to support the existing retail and to start building that critical mass?
Sherry, and I just wanted to point out that you did get a comment to the first question about what types of housing should be prioritized. And Espe Valdez mentioned that mixed income housing would be something that they'd like to see prioritized.
Wonderful, thank you. On the west side. Yeah, and there's some big vacant parcels over there. Not every parcel has to have development that takes up the whole parcel. Things can be phased in over time as a way to kind of, bring in smaller developments to get the ball rolling. Next question, please. So thinking back to the kinds of public realm improvements that were shown and the amenities that go along with the different kinds of housing that Dave was talking about earlier, what types of public realm improvements are most important to you or should be prioritized based on your vision for the corridor? Do you think that, they all really work together and need to happen? And so I think what you were seeing was the different kinds of improvements that come with the different types of housing. But thinking about what you want to see on the corridor and in the specific plan area from the amenity perspective, mobility improvements, things like signalizing intersections to make walking easier, trees along the corridor to give it that boulevard feel as opposed to the highway feel, open spaces that can be used for family activities. What are some of those public realm improvements? And again, thinking about this from an implementation perspective, we really want to know, given that the city has, limited staff to do this and limited money to do this, where should they start? That's what we're really trying to get at is, what are your priorities? Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. Housing will want to support those retail and restaurants that already exist in the downtown.
Sherry, people are unable to see what Jeff's comment was. So if you could read that comment, I think everybody else would be interested in.
Oh, sure. Jeff says, the downtown area would be my priority for new housing since the bones for retail and restaurants already exist. And we had a comment from Facebook before that said, it seems to me that home ownership has moved to north of Interstate 10. So anything along the 111 corridor needs to be more mixed use or rental. Okay, these are great.
Is it appropriate to offer a thought in response to that good point?
I think so.
I mean, that's certainly, that's a very clear insight. And I would simply add that because many of the vacant parcels along 111 are so very deep, the distance from the highway to the existing single family housing to the north and to the south is very great. And that yellow or even the orange layers that I was cartooning on that aerial photo seem to us to be a territory within which single family for sale housing, perhaps of types that are a little different than what is prevalent north of the 10, might work extremely well. Some of the photographs I showed are of a lovely type of housing, which we call side yard housing or patio housing, where the lots are relatively narrow. They are served by alleys at the back so that the whole street isn't garage doors. And they have little side patios and shady courtyards inside the lot so that they can be offered at pretty affordable price points and provide just very high quality, high amenity ownership possibilities at noticeably less cost than what the going rate is north of the freeway, so that somebody could have the possibility of home ownership and walking distance to downtown, walking distance to the redeveloping mall, walking distance to Shield State Garden and Jackalope Ranch, and walking distance to new little cafes and shops that may over time show up at new little centers along the corridor. So I'm not disagreeing with the gentleman's point in any way, except that I think it could be both and not either or.
And I also just want to add to that, you know, housing, even smaller format for sale housing that is within walking distance of downtowns, restaurants, and other amenities similarly tend to appreciate faster than those outside.
Absolutely. We've built several of those neighborhoods out over the last 15 years. And initially they're very affordable for the first buyers. And because they're so much nicer than everything else, they're so much nicer than many other things around, they appreciate in value rapidly. And if one purchases such a unit, then in 10 or 15 years after the little cafe has finally shown up 4 blocks away, the value appreciates rapidly, giving a lot of people who couldn't otherwise get into the ownership market the opportunity to ride values up.
Yes, thank you. And we also got a comment from Facebook that trees and gardening would really help with beautification. So
you're preaching to the choir. Yes, ma'am.
Let's move on to the next question, please. Given the size of the corridor and limited resources, which areas of the corridor should be prioritized for public realm improvements? So again, you know, getting on to the gardening and the trees for beautification, is there somewhere physically along the corridor that you think the city should focus their efforts? And this could be, and you could even say, like, I think it should be where the housing is. I think it should be around the entrance to downtown to support downtown. I think it should be at the gateway to give that sense of place as you're coming in. Those are the kinds of things we're thinking about with this question. Where would you like to see it first? So we got a comment, entrance to downtown. So Espe Valdez is, all of his comments are very focused on supporting the downtown. Jeff says maybe by the Indio Mall. Yeah, because that's revitalizing and turning over itself right now. Those are great suggestions. Next slide, please. So what types of economic development improvements should the city prioritize? Do you think the city should spend time, targeting industries and trying to facilitate job creation? Or do you think the city, and it doesn't have to be one or the other, but just thinking about that there's not an unlimited number of people in the economic development department, or sort of on that workforce development side of trying to bring in infrastructure that supports the existing residents' ability to get jobs. It's and those programs and policies that are really focused around residents and resident incomes. Any thoughts on that? The job creation is, I tend to talk about economic development and job creation in terms of like a buffalo hunting. In terms of, going out and talking to employers and trying to convince them to move to the city. So that's really, I think, what I'm thinking about when I think about job creation. Okay, next slide, please. Miguel. Thank you. And we've seen this a few times now. The city owns some of the corridor's vacant sites. And to be honest, this is a real opportunity to start seeing things happen. If the city owns a parcel, it can, and particularly if it's vacant, there's real opportunity to try to attract development that you want to see to help sort of catalyze the corridor. So, how would you like to see the city use their vacant parcels, or maybe first use their vacant parcels to support affordable and workforce housing, for job generating uses, which means different kinds of commercial development, for revenue creation to support improvements? So just bring in market rate housing, and it's not going to be affordable necessarily, but the city might be able to raise money through ground lease collections to pay for some of the improvements. Or if you have another idea, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how the city can best leverage what they already have. Revenue creation to support improvements. And it's, these are all just priority questions, right? There's no right answer, wrong answer. It's just, how do you want to see the city go about this? What do you think is the best approach? I mean, ideally, the city will be able to do, some of all of this over time. It's just a matter of where to start. Samuel from Facebook says commercial development. Okay. And I think we are just past the top of the hour, which gives us 1 hour for discussion. If anybody wants to, come off chat, ask questions, give thoughts, we'd like to be able to elevate you to be able to turn off mute and speak and have a little bit of a dialogue. So if you would like to do that, please raise your hand, and Miguel will make it happen. And of course, you're welcome to keep putting ideas and thoughts in the chat as well.
Thank you, Espe. Give me 1 second and I will allow you to speak. So Sherry, we have Espe Valdez coming online. Espe, you will get a prompt on your computer. There you go. You're live now.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for allowing me to come on and share my thoughts. I just took a few notes. So tracing back, I think that the gateway arches, like in the downtown area with some kind of beautiful lighting just to welcome people into our town, is a great idea, along with the trees along the walkways to beautify our downtown area. Like the palm trees and the landscaping. I think that kind of sets a tone for, inviting people into our town. So just kind of thinking of a way, an environment-friendly way to do that. And I was thinking, for the lighting, having like a special kind of lighting where, in the evening we could maybe, I'm just thinking of like the Batman signal, how it comes out. So, if it's like for Mother's Day or commemorating 9/11, it'll be something special for us to have in our city to share with the Valley, or as far as it can see, for Memorial Day, having something, a lighting that's reflecting up into the sky. I think that would be kind of something cool and neat for us to incorporate sometime down the line in that area. As far as where we should prioritize the improvements, I mentioned entrance to downtown, but I think maybe starting like in the Highway 111 and Indio Boulevard area. I love the idea of having like the industrial type of restaurant or something to invite people to drive down, Indio Boulevard, people who normally would not drive in that area. And maybe starting, some development on that corner, and also down the corner on Jefferson Street, creating the vibe of them, driving down and, having like the beautiful trees and the open space area for people to ride their bikes into town. It's like, how are we going to get people to drive in to the downtown area that normally wouldn't go to the downtown area or drive in from the Highway 111 area? So just kind of creating like those points of, those focal points for people to want to drive into our town that normally wouldn't. And I think that the idea of having the what was it? The flexible frontage, the commercial, with it being residential and then later on converting it into a commercial use. I think that's a great idea, having like a cute little boutique coffee shop or a restaurant would open up the opportunity for even maybe some of the residents that live in the area to open up their own business, a small business in those areas. And, mixing, housing, I agree that, the North Indio area has done a great job with developing housing. But we do need something a little more affordable. There isn't many people who can afford housing in that price range or even rent. I'm a real estate agent, so I have people asking, for affordable housing, and it's hard to find anything for anyone that can't qualify over a certain price range, even in the rent side of it. So creating something that is going to cover that area that is kind of being left out right now. There's a major need for affordable housing, rent and purchase wise. So creating something like that for them as an entry level. And I agree that it will help that type of real estate will definitely grow in value. And, it's a great opportunity for someone to purchase and to gain some equity in that property, being in the mixed use area with the residential and commercial. I'm trying to think if I have anything else that I wrote down. I think that's pretty much it for now. I hope that was helpful.
Very. Thank you.
I think that was really helpful. I like hearing about how you're thinking about what to prioritize and, thinking about, what are some of the things that can be done now versus can be done later, and what does the city and the community need? This is exactly why we're reaching out to you. What we want to hear as we create the specific plan and the action plan. We want to make sure that we're really capturing, what it is you want the corridor to be. It's your downtown, it's your corridor. So thank you for that. We had a comment from Facebook from Pablo Arellano. Population in Indio is outgrowing the commercial development. Hospital needs to be updated.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's a great comment. Absolutely. And all the uses around it as well. I think, there's some opportunities for some of the commercial to even be supported or anchored by some of those healthcare uses, and be sort of out towards the communities, which is kind of a trend that's been going on in the last few years.
There's a very interesting potential intersection between a lot of local interest in healthy, locally grown foods and the healthcare medical center, that those can be combined into something with a hospitality dimension for people who are staying in India with loved ones who are being cared for in the hospital, and helping support healthy lifestyles in addition to providing medical services.
Does anyone else want to give input? I think everybody's comments have been really fantastic, interesting, and poignant and pointed. And so I want to encourage all of you to contribute and to discuss your priorities.
And we don't have to go to noon if people we don't have to use up all the time, but we certainly are happy to hear every comment everybody has.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for taking time out of your lovely Saturday morning to help us.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Sherry, David, and Kevin, my suggestion is we, stay on for the next 5 minutes to see if we have any final comments or questions. If there's anything that the team would like to close with, particularly Kevin, if there's any closing thoughts, this would be a good time. So we give people an opportunity to think through any final comments or questions that they might have.
Thank
Hey,
you,
everyone.
Miguel.
Kevin, this is Lisa. I just wanted to add that maybe someone could put the website and the link and encourage folks to take the survey if they have not already.
Thank you, Lisa. As Lisa said, we have a survey and folks are encouraged to take that survey. It is on the city website. And there is a specific page for the Highway 111 corridor plan that you can go to. I do want to say thank you to everyone for taking time on your Saturday morning to join us. This is a really important project for the city. The Highway 111 corridor is our spine, if you will allow me to use that term. And what happens along that corridor in the future is in many ways going to help dictate the future of the city of Indio. So we really appreciate you taking the time to give us your input. We value it very much. We will be continuing to gather input from the community. Our next community engagement opportunity is in December, on December 9th. And we're hoping to do that in person if we can, so that we can see folks and talk with you. But stay tuned and continues to give us your input. And if you're willing, please let others know about this project and the opportunity to give feedback. We really do want to hear from the community. This is the community's plan, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin. Sherry, there's a comment there too, if you'd like to read that. That's really good.
Sure. John Salmon says, well, what about medical uses along Highway 111? They have been primarily designated for the Dr. Carrion corridor. I'm working on a project at Madison and Highway 111, and we would like to have medical uses as part of our 20-acre project. I've discussed this previously in the past with David Sargent.
Yes, we agree. That's a very great idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like with the commercial, there's something to be said about concentrating uses, but also as that medical business cluster grows, it's certainly important, we think, for it to have a strong presence on the corridor as 111 grows in importance as the city, as Kevin said, as the city's spine, really as the city's face to much of the world. To have that medical group, that medical concentration of uses have a beautiful face on the corridor is a very strong idea, and Madison would be a great place for that to happen.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, healthcare along the 111 corridor is and can be and can continue to be an anchor, right? It's going to bring people to the area from outside of the area. It's going to enhance that daytime population to help strengthen the retail around it by, people going out to lunch. Even, with a critical mass can support like limited service lodging for people who are staying with somebody who is at the hospital. I think really as part of that sustainable economic development, we want to dig in to the healthcare sector and see how it is that we can strengthen that and do it in a way that is bringing, good jobs as well to the corridor. A lot of the healthcare jobs are, home health. And so we want to see, how is it that we can build on this cluster of healthcare that's already at the corridor?
Yeah. And while it's very important to focus on getting a critical mass of activity, restaurants, shops, etc., in the downtown, and very important to concentrate on strengthening the existing cluster of medical uses around the hospital. I think the nature of corridors and the nature of pedestrian-oriented, walkable, more active neighborhood and center environments is that you don't concentrate everything at one end of the corridor, so everybody has to drive back and forth. So bringing some types of medical services closer to where people live, bringing food and beverage and conveniences closer to where people live, doesn't need to be in conflict with a powerfully growing downtown. It's always a balancing act, but concentrating around important centers, but also providing satellite facilities that are closer to where people live is a very strong idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Ooh, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
It's our pleasure, and it's so great to be working with a community that cares so deeply about their town and about making about remaking a strong center for it.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments?
Sherry, looks like we don't have anything on Facebook, and given that it's a Saturday, it'd be great to give people their Saturday back since they did such a good job joining us so far.
Thank
Yeah, we
you
just-
everyone so much for joining us. Yes, thank you for giving up part of your Saturday. Your input is so important to this process and we're very grateful to you. And now you are all dismissed. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.